Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by Peyton Elder to discuss the film Rebel Moon Chapter 2 Curse of Forgiveness. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Welcome back to another installment of the podcast, everybody. Thrilled to really dive into part two of our Rebel Moon Director's Cuts conversations here. My brother-in-law, Peyton Elder, is back on the program, continuing where we left off from part one. And we just keep that good train rolling and chatting about all the fun stuff that is in Rebel Moon part two, or chapter two, I should say, in this version, Curse of Forgiveness. And we go into the release format of it, the differences between the R-rated cut and the PG-13 cut. We talk philosophically about forgiveness and what it means for each of the characters. So I think this is a really awesome episode, and I can't wait for you all to check it out on the other side of this segment here, which is our Cloud City Gossip program, the portion of the show where we talk about all the news and happenings that's taken place in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy over the past week. And the big thing really is that there's a full panel list available now for Star Wars Celebration in Japan. Also, they've formally announced that there will be a live stream for the celebration, which is awesome for those of us here at CouchCon that won't be attending in person. That some of those panels will be hopefully live streamed to us. They'll be doing a lot of exclusive interviews and just giving us a sense of what it is like to be there as best as they can when we're at home. Every celebration has done it thus far since 2015, and the team has done a fantastic job at the Star Wars YouTube channel. So I hope they continue to do wonderful, great work. I know there's some amazing panels that they've got. So go check out that list if you are going, but also if you're not going, I think it's also good to keep track of what are the things that are being talked about over there, particularly some of the bigger panels, of course, because that will dominate a lot of the discussion here. So looks like there will be a panel talking about Lucasfilm Animation and giving a sneak peek at what the future is of that, which I think will be something to really key in on at the program. It looks like also there'll be like a Star Wars video game announcement for a new upcoming Star Wars game that's coming out. So I think that is something that's on my personal checklist to be aware of as well. And some other the smaller panels too that I want to highlight is like talking about the Young Indiana Jones uh, series and how it connects to the prequels will be an important topic of discussion. Some of the connections between like Kurosawa and Japanese samurai films to Star Wars and the influence that they had on Lucas will be an important conversation. Our friends over at Blast Points are doing an excellent episode on the George Lucas Super Live Adventure. Wild and wacky story that is, and I hope that some of these panels get recorded and then are released later to the public. We've got a lot of friends and previous guests on the show, and future guests on the show too that are going to be having panels at Celebration too. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for those, and hope that they get audio recordings of those so they can release those on their shows. So the folks at home can get a chance to check those out as well. Will be awesome. So yeah, I think this is a really great celebration. I wouldn't knock the schedule at all. I think this is a really jam-packed 3 days for folks that are going there, and for the folks at home too. We got a lot coming our way too, I can imagine. There's definitely going to be some footage that probably gets out to the public. A lot of casting announcements, probably just general good aura around Star Wars, and this is an exciting time coming. We're less than a month away from Star Wars Celebration, so it's just nearly around the corner here. So be on the lookout for more details as it comes up closer to the time being then. Also, all episodes for season 2 of Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures are now available on Disney Plus. So if you've been keeping up with those, they released the final batch of episodes for season 2, and I hope maybe there's an announcement for like a season 3 or upcoming stories in that space. I've been, as much as I can, watching episodes over my lunch break here and there, and I've really enjoyed this show so far, and I can't wait to hopefully get into an episode where we dive into some of the themes that it presents later on in this podcast here. So that is all the news that I had for this week, folks. And on the other side of the short break, we'll be back with our episode on Rebel Moon Chapter 2, Curse of Forgiveness. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, everybody. We're here to celebrate and talk about some of that Lucasfilm adjacent things that I always talk about on the podcast. So we're going to talk about the director's cut for part 2 of Rebel Moon. And this is, of course, titled Curse of Forgiveness. Now, you may recall a few weeks back, we had Peyton Elder join the show to chat about part 1, the director's cut. And of course, we're going to finish that conversation here by completing the saga as we know it at this point for Rebel Moon. So Peyton, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, and how are you doing?
Thank you. Glad to be back. I'm doing pretty well. It's about 4:30 here for me in Paris, so I'm feeling alive, feeling middle of the day, got lots of energy, ready to go.
Yes, 4:30 on a Saturday rather than recording at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday like we did last time.
Yeah,
Middle of the
after
week.
after a full day of work. Yeah, that was still a nice episode, but yeah, this
Full
hence
day
why
of
I
work,
requested
hopping
this.
on and off the Paris Metro, cooking up a meal, and then Rebel Moon talk, bed, wake up, do it all again.
Boom, cycle of life.
Cycle of life indeed. But we're back here to chat about Rebel Moon, Chapter 2, The Curse of Forgiveness. Now, in follow up to our discussion that we did when you were last on the show, now you've seen both movies, you've seen the full arc, you've actually seen both PG-13 versions too. So you have the full sense of the Rebel Moon saga at this point. Let's chat again about the release strategy that Netflix did here. So releasing the PG-13 version and the R version, and particularly releasing the PG-13 version first. So let's start with that question here. What do you think of that release strategy now that you have seen the full picture?
It hasn't changed my opinion from the
Uh-huh.
last time we spoke, and just to repeat myself from last time, I understand why, from a business perspective, it's done, but it hinders or it damages the performance and
Yeah.
even just the amount of viewers of the real version,
Yeah.
the director's cut, but the real cut. So I disagree with the strategy from the point view of the viewer, because so many people are never going to watch both versions. They're just going
Mhm.
to watch the shorter one or whichever one comes out first and never even know what they're missing.
That's
Uh,
right.
so my feelings stay the same after both watches of all four movies. I will say I think the second part, the shorter version, was much better than the first part, short version.
Comparing the PG-13 versions, this is better of a film overall than
Yes,
part
the
1.
sequel was better than the part one and of the PG-13 versions, in my opinion.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment about the PG-13 versions too. Um, I will say, and we'll get into this conversation in a little bit here, but I think that this one benefits the most from having the extra hour of included footage too. But we can have that conversation in just a second here. But I think it's exactly right. I think it's the way that they did this. Again, we understand the business side of it, but it's a bit damning in a way for the brand of Rebel Moon. Whereas, like, the
Yes.
negative publicity and critical reception to films that are basically chopped up and cut up because they need to fit a PG-13 rating, because this film is definitely not PG-13 in its final
Mhm.
version at all. Um, that's what people see first. That's what, if you Google Rebel Moon, like that, it's almost like the director's cuts don't exist, right?
Right.
Like the critical scores, whatever it's IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, etc. These things that people use to like say like, okay, I'm going to watch this movie because it has a high score according to this. When we've people value their time and how much they devote effort to things, right? Are they going to watch 4 hours of Elementary tonight, or are they going to watch a movie? These are choices that people make, and these are the algorithm systems that they use in order to make that choice. And it's a shame that there is, I would argue, a far vastly better version of this that they're missing out on because of the way that things are pushed to them, whether it be Google telling them this, a quick search, or just the fact that they've heard from word of mouth from other people that may have seen it already. They're like, yeah, I didn't like that, without knowing that like this is kind of a completely different movie. Like, it has different plot points. Things don't happen the same way as they
Mhm.
do exactly in it. Like, you get from point A to point B, of course, but the in between is completely different.
Yeah, I think you're right. You said it's a people's choice, each, depending on the day or night, what it might change what they want to watch. So maybe I think it's what we discussed last time. The best solution is release both at the same time. Give the people the option to go one way or the other, and then that's it. I think that that's a fair way for the director. Again, I know Zack Snyder made this deal with Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
but in the future, this won't be the last time there's two versions of a movie. Uh,
Oh, let's
hope,
hope not. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Release them at the same time, and then people can decide. With kids, all right, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna watch this friendlier version, or if it's just the parents, or
Mm-hmm.
anyone else that's above 16, can dive into the real one.
Yeah. I mean, I ask this question again. Do they even need a PG-13 version? Like, is it so watered down, arguably, in the PG-13 version that it's like, will kids even enjoy what they even got here because of it?
No, it's not a must. It's not a need.
Yeah.
It, it's just purely business driven. You have to think. Really little kids, sure, they're gonna enjoy it probably either way. I
Hmm.
do think that the sequel of the PG-13 versions felt like a decent movie, and I had seen the director's cut first, so I changed
Hmm.
my strategy this time. I watched director's cut
Smart.
first, and then the shorter one versus I did the other way around for part one. Um, and I actually enjoyed the second one, even the PG-13 version, but I really didn't enjoy so much as I shared last time.
Yeah.
Part one of the PG-13s, it was corny, it was too short, not enough character development. Um, so I think they did a better job with the second one,
Hmm.
but because the first one wasn't well executed, in my opinion, most people probably didn't return for the second.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I think they were soiled by the experience of the first one, and then they're like, I'm not going to do that. And then
Yeah,
you get told there's an even longer version. You're like, oh, I'm definitely not revisiting that one again,
yeah,
without
and
having the open mindedness to experience arguably something different.
and damaging to Snyder's reputation, I would say.
Yeah,
Like, if
yeah,
people just see the PG-13 versions, they're gonna think that's the quality of work he puts out. It's something they might not want to return for. So,
exactly. I think it does damn his other projects to a certain type of purgatory
yeah,
in their
mhm.
minds. No, of course, is a director that has a lot of opinions about him to begin with, so people come in with those preconceived notions as well. I think, but I think for the normie audience, perhaps as we as other podcasts call them, um, Netflix is a worldwide distribution platform. Right, it's the largest thing across the globe that allows people to access media and entertainment. The subscriber numbers for Netflix are through the roof compared to everything else, and more people watch Netflix than they do like go to the movie theater and or watch things on TV. Like, I think only like big sporting events are the only things that could really compare with the viewership numbers that Netflix has for some of their big marquee projects. Um, so again, this is, like you said, it's exposing him to a potentially vast new audience, and then you see that, and then you're like, I didn't really care for that too much, or it didn't really hit the same way. It's an interesting thing that I wonder how it will affect his career going on. But you also make an interesting point about your viewing experience of this, because now you watch the the R version first, the hard R, I will say, and then the PG-13 version after that. Um, so it's like you watched it, the full version, the original version, the original intent, and then you like watched a speed run of it that like hit all the beats, the important things that you need to know to get to the end there without like having all the sides of the buffet. but you kind of got everything you needed to. So that's why I think maybe you were able to enjoy it a bit more than you did the other way around.
Yeah, so I watched the PG-13 version right before we started recording, and when you do it the other way around, you watch the short one first and then the long one. It is easier, I think, to pick out immediately what's been added here.
Mm-hmm.
How does the story expand further? Versus, I'm glad I got to see the long version of part two first because that's the real movie, and I got to really sit through it and enjoy it for a first time viewing versus watching the, as you said, the fast run,
Yes.
and then more like watching the director's cut through like an analytical lens to compare the differences.
Hmm.
I would much rather watch the shorter version through the analytical lens because it's just like the nuts and bolts, right? It's not all the everything on the side, as you said, at the buffet.
Right.
So,
Right.
so yeah, I'm glad I did that strategy from a viewing standpoint. Perhaps it was a little more difficult to notice all the differences. I think more so because of the amount of time in between my viewings
Mm-hmm.
versus
Yeah,
doing
probably.
this. But it's life, things
Yeah,
came
you,
up.
you weren't devoting 5 hours of a day to watching both versions back to back.
Not this time, or at
Not
least
this
not in the
time,
same
indeed.
weekend. Not in the same weekend.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, to watch the second one, the director's cut, the first time, I really really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film, and
Nice.
as I already said, I think even the PG-13 wasn't so bad versus the first part, but definitely still much better. I think the full version.
So I think you would argue that the additional hour was definitely needed. I think that's fair to say.
Yes, when I was doing my comparison, I think just the gap, the thing you lose is so much character development.
Uh huh.
You get to see the relationships between the warriors and the village grow so much more.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember thinking the first time, when they're doing the harvesting, I was like, this is a lot of harvesting scenes. Like, I get the point. They're harvesting wheat, and they're hanging out together. But upon watching the PG-13 version, you realize like watching all that really helps you to understand more the connection that has been developed
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
everybody. And it's just a more then you're more emotionally invested. So maybe he still could have streamlined that a little bit, but in general, I think you just get much more into the relationships, even like between Core and everybody else.
Right. Right. No, you definitely get so much more of that. Like this film is like roughly an hour and a half of action, pure action, right? That the whole last half of this
Yeah,
film, I will say you cut it right down the middle. It's nonstop action until the end.
yeah,
And that first part there is where it really expands a lot more. And I will say, in addition to the character development that you get, that I think is sorely missing from the PG-13 version, but things just make sense a lot more. Like there's just like a line of dialogue that like explains the why of everything they're doing. Like I don't
hmm,
recall the General Titus like we need to harvest the grain because it's our best defense against them line being in the PG-13 version as much, and like the explaining of like why they're spending time harvesting and why they need to do it. Cuz I think that was a big criticism when the film first came out, the PG-13 version. People were like, why are they spending
hmm.
so much time wasting time harvesting? And then it's like,
Harvesting.
okay, now I it explains it right there. It was right there first. I don't know why that
Yeah,
wasn't included. It seemed like, add 15 more seconds to the PG-13 version to explain the like, okay, maybe we can use it as so they don't blow us out of the sky. Like that was their original intent. Now they do say it later on, and that was probably their like we'll cover in both places. But for a film that's like 3 hours long, you need to have multiple places sometimes where people rehash things.
yeah,
um so it's just that, and like the whole end sequence with the Belisarius is not included. Like that's like a post-credit scene in a way.
yeah,
All of the why behind the assassination of the
yeah,
slain king and the Princess Issa, like why Archelaus is on the run, that whole machination of the politics behind things, making Belisarius a real like terrible person is is at the forefront of this film that isn't at all in the other one.
Yeah, in the shorter versions through both movies, you only get, I don't know, 5 minutes total of Belisarius,
If that.
and he's the ultimate villain. So I know after the first one, I was expecting, we were even hypothesizing maybe they go to the Mother World. Maybe that's where the second movie leads to, and then it doesn't, and that's fine. But yeah, there's still, without the director's cut, you still have no good comprehension of the backstory
Mm-hmm.
of the main villain. We
The
know there's
main villain.
Noble, but really it's Belisarius, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, they take out of course, they take out the sex scene with Cora and Gunnar, um, which
It's a
is
long scene too.
a long scene,
That's
but
why I was like, man, it's a hard R.
yeah,
Hard R rating.
for real. And
Not just
even
for the blood and
even
guts alone, but yeah, that's a long scene.
even Tarak, they leave out the whole scene of Tarak and the old lady, the older woman in the
Love that.
village.
Love that whole sequence. Like, equal opportunity lover.
Yeah. So it was just, I think for Cora, her attitude towards Gunnar, I think, really changed in the second
Mhm,
one. She really
mhm,
just, it seems like she just like let down
mhm.
her walls and just really leaned into what they had. And even like without even the sex scene, I think is most important to show that
Yes.
even when they are harvesting the grain, they have a small moment in the barn. It all just
Mhm.
makes more sense versus, yeah, in the PG-13 version, you just kind of accept. All of a sudden, they're lying in bed together, the night after the feast.
You have to like piece in your mind what happened.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I think that was great. The other thing that was really excluded for me was the scene with the when Cora's on board the ship, the
Mhm.
dreadnought, and she turns around and she blows it up with the what's it called, the arm of the king.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
I think. So they completely omitted that. We don't see
Completely.
How Cassius dies.
Oh yeah. The whole
Um,
conversation she has with like the woman that just sheds tears when they
yes, yeah, with the engine.
yep.
So maybe that part. I mean that whole thing, to my opinion, the whole point of that was to allude to a third movie.
Mhm.
We can get to that later, but yeah. So overall, I think most of it was very much needed. Even the opening of the short version was just Anthony Hopkins pretty much recapping everything that happened in the first movie,
Yep.
which I mean I guess is okay, but
Well, I will say like if you're and this is I think would be a downside, maybe a criticism of like how they described Rebel Moon is like a Star Wars esque kind of film, right? That's the opening crawl, if you will, is him doing that narration of like, all right,
mm,
here's what happened in the last chapter. Here's setting you up for this one. Now go.
mm,
He did the same one in the part one too, where he was like explaining a bit about the mother world and the politics of everything, and then here we go.
yeah,
I like that it doesn't include that in either of them.
yeah, I agree. I think without knowing it's a Star Wars adaptation, I wouldn't compare it to Star Wars. I
Hmm.
think you obviously there's obvious parallels, being in space and stuff, but it still has its very own distinct, I think, flavor.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and the last thing, just to harp on the differences between the two, is we get a little more Jimmy in the full
A
director's
little more, a
script.
lot more, Jimmy.
They exclude the bounty hunters from being the how that
Yeah, like that's a big plot point. I think
it
is
is.
their inclusion.
I didn't hate how they got to those conclusions without the bounty hunters. They pretty much just pieced together that since Cora's there, uh,
Yeah, they just kind of assume in the other version.
yeah, she's probably taking care of the bad guys. But yeah, in the short version, we see Jimmy. He just
He's like the
watching.
scarecrow protector of the town.
Yeah, and then he doesn't do anything until he's standing in front of the tank and takes it down.
Oh,
But in
great scene.
great scene, the fight scenes in general were awesome. But yeah, but then with the bounty hunters in the long version, he finally makes the choice. He picks a side by killing them and everything.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, he's already chosen a side before even the big battle starts.
yeah, Yeah.
I mean, he's technically chosen a side by shooting the guys when they're trying to assault Sam, but that was a freak accident in a way. He
Yeah.
scared himself by doing that. So this is like a full like declaration in a way.
Agreed.
Um, yeah, I think just like the whole battle plan is more described in detail in this, like the getting of the ship
Mhm.
and just saying like, all right, we're gonna do this. This is how it's gonna go. We have all these tunnels underneath. Just that is just explained in so much greater detail that just makes so much more sense
Yeah.
in this version versus the other one where it just kind of like falls into place. One might argue, and a lot more training with the team, and again, like you said, a lot more of the character development. I think some of the best sequences of this movie, I would argue, are like the learning the backstories of all the
Mhm.
characters in a lot more depth than you get in the first one.
Yeah.
So I know like that was something you were hoping to learn about more in this version, like learning about Tarek's backstory. What was General Titus doing? Like, how did he become this guy that's left on this gladiator planet, basically? Um,
Mhm.
it, just talking about that and perhaps some of the other scenes, like what else stood out to you in this R-rated version overall?
Yeah, the backstories were huge. I I thought the way they got there was fine, where they just sat around the table and they're like, "Let's just all share our story." I
Hmm.
mean, I feel like maybe there could have been a more creative way to learn about each person's backstory, but at the end of the day, it was fine. It was interesting. So that was the big one for sure. Just leading to a higher overall quality, I think, of the film and connecting with the characters.
Hmm.
Obviously, the violence and the blood was much different. I remember I looked up. I wrote down the name. If you remember what's the name of the young blonde girl who's with Eris?
Sam.
Sam. Thank you. Sam is the one for whatever reason that gets to learn how to use like the shotgun version of the laser.
Yeah.
And, and I watched the PG-13 version with subtitles, and is that gun is called the blunderbuss.
Hmm.
Um, and in the PG-13 version, she shoots the guy from like 2 feet away, and he dies like normally. But in the R
No
version,
splatter.
he explodes into.
He does not exist anymore. There's
Yeah,
nothing left.
yeah. I think also with the R version, it was more cruel. I think
Hmm.
when their like special forces are breaking into the longhouse with the women and children,
Yeah.
they immediately come in from the side and they decapitate like three women with the guns,
No
and that's
mercy.
no mercy. And that was obviously how it probably would be, and that was just completely excluded from the PG-13 version. So I think it just made it more intense and real, and again, just overall emotionally investing.
Hmm.
I thought the slow mo was used very well. Even in
Yeah.
the PG-13, I didn't find it as cheesy or too much.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then finally, as I already mentioned, Korra using the arm of the king to take down Cassius in the bridge of the ship. I thought that
So
was
wild. Like
a
a
great
whole
a great
plot point
moment.
not even really included.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, I guess the end was the same, but yeah, it was much more interesting that way. And then you actually get a death for Cassius,
Hmm.
and PG-13 is completely.
Yeah, rather than just assuming he goes down with the ship. Like you see
Yeah,
it on camera.
exactly. So, and then we get to see Noble's head cut in half.
Definitely not coming back. Yes.
No, this time it's for sure. So, yeah, just a more complete story and more emotionally investing. I think the
Hmm.
R-rated version versus the not.
So the scene where they're telling each other their backstories and then Cora refuses to really share, right? Where Titus is like,
Mhm.
I need to know who I'm serving with in order to like make us feel like we care about each other. That whole sequence is a plot point that would have been used in the if there were like a Justice League sequel. Um he would have Snyder would have used that to have like the members of the Justice League kind of like around the round table basically and be like, all right, we may die tomorrow. How did we get here? Tell me about your tales
Mm,
of woe. Um what was your thing? And this is kind of like how he describes it as like the Last Supper sequence, right? Even the way
Oh,
it's filmed and shot is like, you notice they're not all sitting around a table. Actually, they're all sitting on one side as the camera kind of pans off to each of them. So that's kind of
okay.
their like, all right, we're going off into this big crucible tomorrow. Anything you want to share? Anything you want to put on the table here? And that's how it goes from there. So that's
Okay.
something that's like a hidden Easter egg for folks that I wanted to share, just in case that may impact your thinking if you happen to rewatch this at some point. I know that you may not rewatch movies that often, but you never know.
I need like a 5 year gap between rewatches, I think. But no, that does change my perspective. It was very intentional, as it was a nod to another movie of his. I totally get that and respect it. So I know this one they weren't all on one side of the table, but sentiment more or less the same. So
Yes, sentiment indeed. So the title of this movie is The Curse of Forgiveness. So the concept, obviously, of forgiveness, therefore, is a central idea within the movie. Why do you think the characters struggle with this feeling? And is forgiveness something that has to be earned? Is and then beyond that, is anyone beyond forgiveness?
so forgiveness is certainly prevalent in the director's cut, but I found it much less in the PG-13. So
Yeah, you wouldn't even know.
the only character was with Korra being forgiven by Princess Issa. Like
Hmm.
that's the only time I think they really focus on forgiveness.
Yeah.
And obviously that her Issa's forgiveness towards Korra was the driving reason that I guess Korra decided to run away
Hmm.
um, instead of killing Belisarius, which huge mistake.
Just take him out then and there.
Just huge mistake. Couldn't. um, but other than that, it's really hard to speak to the forgiveness idea from based on the PG-13 version. I
Hmm.
think in the R one it is easier. I think there's also the conversation between Cora and the engine
Yeah. Yeah.
of the
She's like, I'm
ship.
sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and she says, but I know you're gonna avenge me more. You're gonna wake up my sisters. I was like,
Hmm.
I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds cool. So
That's
I
the path
think
of rebellion, Peyton. Rebellion.
okay, okay. So yeah, I thought it was nice. Cora definitely struggled with it, even at to the very end after they're burning the piers of all the dead
Hmm.
bodies, and she says, "Don't forgive me or whatever. I've done terrible things."
Well, I mean, she's also like, when Gunner dies, she's like, why can't I have anything good?
Yeah,
I get a little bit of happiness, and then it's taken away from me a day later.
yeah. I think she really struggled with that. It's clear, and Titus as well. I think those were the
And they all
two.
struggle with like this concept of living beyond.
Right. But when you think of the other characters like Tarek and Nemesis,
Nemesis. Yep.
like their backstories, they weren't so much in the wrong. They didn't do anything. I guess Tarek was upset with himself that he fled his country. But
I mean, that's a hard thing to deal with.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think it's their drive, I guess, to want forgiveness. But it's interesting that it's Cora and Titus at the end. I think they were the hardest ones that were dealing with forgiveness because Titus
Hmm.
lost all of his men because of him, and they just had a moment together where they both hugged, and I think they acknowledged that maybe
Hmm.
to some degree what they had done in that battle kind of like balanced the scales a little bit for them based on what they thought they had done poorly in the past.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely a philosophical conversation, of course. And it just breeds the question of like, if someone bestows forgiveness, how do we accept that? Right? Like Princess
Yeah.
Issa is literally like, I give you forgiveness, and then Arthelaus is like, I don't think I deserve it. I don't want it. I'm projecting, but obviously this is a big thing that she struggles with for years
Mhm.
after after that event. Um, Titus too, another great example of like, oh, I have to live with the guilt of what I've done, and I don't have a person to say like I forgive you. So like this sucks. I wish I had the opportunity at least. So like I'm just
True.
living without a without a vision for how to move on, or like I have no foundation for that. And I think forgiveness gives us a little bit of that foundation by which to like build again when we feel like we've been struck down or we've done something that has struck someone down. Um, but for these people, they're like, and a lot of them, especially because they have that warrior culture, they're embedded in this world that is like worlds are being destroyed. They're being taken up. They're being forced to fight for either the mother world or against the mother world, or they're forced to be a slave because of the mother world. Like war is around them.
Mhm.
They are in this society where it's deemed it, through a noble death, that is how forgiveness is earned. And that's the only way out. Whereas it
Yeah.
seems like they, through this noble act of defending this community and some of the things they've learned along the way too. I think learning that Princess Issa lives is a big one. And she's like, oh, okay, didn't actually kill her. That's a bit of a thing
Yeah.
here for her. But through the act of saving these people, being selfless in that matter, I feel like they've, in a sense, internally feel like they've earned the ultimate marker of like, okay, I think I'm forgiven for my crime, right? It's that penance of you do a crime or something you feel you've done wrong to others, you put yourself into a timeout, so to speak, or a prison or something like that of your mind or something
Hmm.
like that. And then when you feel like internally or someone tells you, that could be forgiveness, but if you don't feel like, it's like forgiveness in a way, I guess in this metaphor is like someone opening the jail cell and then you being like, no, I feel like I need to spend more time in here. And then not coming out on the other side until I guess you're ready to. And it seems like with this battle here and through the helping of this community and then the sacrifices they make together in this endeavor, that a lot of these folks, it feels like to me, they're able to emerge from that jail cell and then take up this charge and call to something greater as a result of that. Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on those ramblings?
I think you're right. I think we all struggle with when we do things that we feel are wrong. We we need to earn. We feel like we need to earn forgiveness. It's hard to accept unearned forgiveness if someone just gives it to you
Mm-hmm.
out of the grace of their heart. I don't know
Mm.
if that's a pride thing. You know, we need
Mm.
to, or we. It's hard to be humble enough to accept forgiveness and say, I don't deserve this, but I'm going to take it anyways, right? Like
Yeah.
to say that and then truly feel that way, I think is really hard to do. Um, the human psyche is a crazy, crazy thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
We hurt ourselves more than we help ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah, we're our own worst enemies in many ways. But in this movie, I think you're right. As you said at the end, they are fighting almost for themselves to cleanse their own palates, their own slates, and like you said, a lot of them I think have done that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and now want to continue the fight, but not for themselves, but for the
The greater
bigger,
good.
the greater good. Yeah, it's not. It doesn't feel like they're still doing it to feel good about themselves, to
Yes.
make up.
Yes. Yes. A bit of
It's
a selfless act is a way to get over selfishness.
right, exactly. So yeah, I think you're right, and again, everything is leading. I think we'll talk about it later to another film, and I
Hmm.
love the opportunity to see all of them working without that weight of
Yeah.
on their shoulders.
It is a weight, and it is like the title suggests, it is a curse. Like in some ways,
Yes,
if you don't feel like you are worthy of forgiveness, then it's a curse on you if someone forgives you, and then you're like constantly having that inwards battle of like, I don't know, I'm not, I don't think I'm there yet,
right.
and that holds you back.
Yes, and like you said, I think we kind of put ourselves in that mental prison, and if we use Titus as the example, like he was drinking, like that was kind of his
It's only
his
escape,
thing, his escape, his prison,
or I
and then
guess
he
dying in the gladiator ring was his ultimate.
right with one way or
Eventually,
the
like I'm
other,
gonna have a warrior that kills me, that's good enough and worthy enough, and that's gonna be it.
yeah. But then he stops drinking, right? He realizes this might be a real opportunity to right my
Hmm.
wrongs, you
Hmm.
know, and and it shows how much he cares about it, and yeah. So I think he found he was waiting for the good moment, or he was or trying to kill himself through other ways because he didn't think it'd ever come. But once he realized what was on the table, I think he took it very seriously and worked out.
Yeah, Nemesis is another interesting one too on that one where she's literally dying defending children, right? She
Mhm.
wasn't able to defend her own children, and then we're introduced to her killing that Harmata, the spider monster
Yes.
thing, because they are taking children and killing them, and like that, in terms of like seeking that noble warrior's death, like this is where I feel most comfortable is defending those that are defenseless. um that's how I can earn my forgiveness for not being able to forgive, for not being able to save those that I cared about most, is to do that. So like it's all various aspects of the wheel of this are on the table here in this film, and it's wild that you only really get that in this version of the movie versus the other one where it's just like great war film, they come and save the day. You get a little
Yes.
hints and tidbits of potentially like a greater thing going out there, but this really just dives into the character of it all and being like, man, humans are really hard to each other and we're hard to ourselves, and like these are hard concepts of humanity that we're struggling with to today.
Yes, it's a great point. I didn't even think about Nemesis being the one in the longhouse through that lens.
Hmm.
It's a great point. I looked at it as she's a close range combat person, so let's put her where
True.
let's keep her off the open battlefield, and
Yeah,
she'll
Titus
probably
is a smart person putting his warriors in position.
yeah. So yes, I think in the long version, through the scenes of the harvesting, we see her get much closer to that young boy. Obviously,
Especially,
not
yeah, the
her
kid.
child, but it's clear she's seeing him as her own, or like he reminds her of her own children from the past. So you get to see in the long version, like the director's cut, that relationship and why it's so important to her and why he fights for her at the end, right? Like he doesn't just stay back
Hmm.
hiding behind the table. He goes and tries to help her. Versus the PG-13, it's there's a little bit, but
Yeah,
it's not enough, in my opinion, to really warrant him risking a 7-year-old risking his life.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it is. It's really nice to get the chance to deep dive into like the meaning of each character's path. You could easily watch both, both directors' cuts and not do that. I don't.
Sure.
It's not so obvious, but when you take the time, and thanks to this podcast, like I'm doing it. Like I don't know if I would otherwise, but
Yeah, it
there's a
forces
lot
you to think
there.
critically about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot more to chew on.
a lot of layers to the onion.
A lot of layers to the onion. And for the folks at home too, I want to plug this because this is a really great conversation about the concept of forgiveness, which is such an abstract thing and means so much to everybody and differently. There's a fantastic book out there. So in my undergrad, my first class in college was about the concept of forgiveness as just a full on seminar topic. And there's a book that I want to recommend to everybody called The Sunflower. It's by Simon Wiesenthal, who I will spoil the premise of the story because it's not really about that at all. He is a survivor of the Holocaust, and at some point during the final days of the Nazi atrocities, he was a worker in one of the concentration camps and was taken separately to a kind of a makeshift like hospital room that a nurse took him, and there was a Nazi officer that was wrapped up in bandages and it was literally on his deathbed, and he's like, I'm can you forgive me for what we've done? And that's the moral ethical question of him being like, can I forgive him? And he does something there. I'm not going to spoil it for everybody what his choice is in that moment. And then that's like literally the first quarter of the book, and the rest of it is him reaching out to top political, philosophical, religious, various other scholars across the globe at the time, and asking them what they would do and how they would approach the situation, and did he make the right choice, etc. So it's just a great expose on the concept of forgiveness and the limits and limitations, perhaps, of it. So great further of this conversation, even forward if people want to continue diving into that mental philosophy.
Sounds
Great.
great.
Well, let's get back to the main the war of this of this story, right? It's literally an hour and a half of this 3 hour movie is nothing but constant action and battle
Mhm.
sequences. And you can argue that each of the main cast has their moment to shine in that time frame.
Yes.
But of like the main cast overall, who would you say personally is the MVP of this battle and why?
So I think they do a great job in the movie of, as you said, giving everyone their moments. It's an hour, it's 90 minutes of straight war,
Yeah,
but
no stop.
it's not like at no point was I like, all right, this is too much. Like they did a lot of cutting to different characters, different
Hmm.
speeds of action. So it was very well done. I thought very
Yeah,
well executed and organized. I would say lots of MVP candidates. I hate to say my LVP is probably Tarek.
the loser,
The least valuable, the least
least valuable.
like
Why
I
was Tarek so low?
I told you last podcast. I was really intrigued by him. I liked his character. I think
And
he's
then he
very
just lets you
charismatic.
down.
I just when I think about what each person did individually, he led the second wave of foot soldiers
Yeah.
and 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 then killed people on the battlefield. Great, but like I don't think he had any defining moments. Unfortunately, I really liked him, but he didn't just do anything above and beyond, I would say.
But he has
Um,
that great moment with Milius where they're like, they look into each other's eyes and they're like, this might be the end, but we're going out together.
that was a great moment, and I really liked actually that Tarek he realized, like he acknowledged that said, "I don't want to die." Like
Yeah, right? It's
I
a
thought I
very
was
human answer.
yeah, it was a very nice moment. I thought he was like, "I don't want to at all, but if I have to, then yeah, let's do it together." So I thought that was really nice, and that moment stuck out to me, but doesn't make him a MVP.
Yeah, he's not jumping around cutting off legs here and there and having this like
Yeah,
Legolas moment, right?
right. But I think everyone else could get a nod. I mean, probably Titus, right? Because without Titus, the whole thing was just gonna never work.
That's true. He is kind
Um,
of really, he's the Belichick of this whole thing.
yeah, he was key. Um, I think even Milius, she took the moment and got the bazooka or the
Hmm.
javelin
Hmm.
and blew up the spider tank. So that was
Hmm.
her big moment because that thing was just wrecking everything.
They weren't going to last
Um,
much longer.
yeah, and she didn't even make an appearance until like halfway through the battle, I think. So
Nope, nope, nope.
so she didn't have so much airtime, but she made an impact for sure. Um, I mean, Cora obviously. Gunner's just kind of like he started the whole thing. Cora was going to be a
Uh,
made a was about to give in somehow
yeah, she was going to be a
believe
human sacrifice.
that was shocking that she even considered that. But I think because Titus I think is the obvious one. I want to give it to Nemesis.
Okay, that's a good
I
one.
think Nemesis is my MVP. They could have won that battle, but if that longhouse had been taken, I mean, the spirit of that village is gone. Like the soul,
Yeah, there's
like
nothing to fight
women,
for if
children,
there's
or
no
yeah,
kids and people that can't defend themselves.
yeah. So who knows, like what the future of that village would even be? Like they might just scatter, or they would stay, and they'd probably stay, but it wouldn't be the same, obviously. So she protected the ambush, and then if like they did take the longhouse, then they probably would have just pinched him in from the other side and then
Hmm.
won the battle that way. So I'm gonna give it to Nemesis.
Nemesis. That's
How about
interesting.
you?
You didn't once name drop Jimmy in this,
That's
who
fair. I do
literally
have
is like big hero moment, drops down in, goes ham on everybody, headshots galore.
I knew I was missing. I was missing someone. I'm not. Yeah, obviously Jimmy. Again, without him, they would have died. But I was a little confused because in the first movie, when they're like, he first comes out of the box and that like jerk soldier like shoots him, he
Hmm.
like falls backward. I know he's fine, but he like falls backwards a few feet, like falls to the ground. And then in this war, in this scene, he's getting blasted and then just doesn't budge. So is just not like no continuity there. Or like, is he? Is he
I guess I'll defend it in the only
indestructible?
way where it's like, who knows what the power of that weapon was, right? If that
Fair,
guy had a
fair.
bit more of like an oomph to it, right? That kind of like a blunderbuss kind of deal versus a little pistol he's getting shot with, or the equivalent of like a submachine gun.
I guess so, but if you're having 30 submachine guns or 30 pistols, you'd think it would equate to maybe one shot from 30 yards away. But whatever, we're nitpicking here. Yeah, Jimmy obviously could be another very, very good candidate. He could have done more earlier. He could have.
Hmm.
I don't want to give it to him because I think he could have interceded and prevented a lot of the carnage, but
Yeah.
he waited. It seems like he was waiting until he felt that they really needed him,
Yeah, when that
which,
second wave comes and they think they've won, and then nope, they're
yeah,
coming again. Keep coming.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
not stopping. Jeez. And, well, I mean, you could argue too. He doesn't succeed in this effort, but for a guy that's just a hunter, right? Den does a pretty good job of almost taking out Noble.
R.I.P. He wasn't close. He was nowhere close.
He tried. He tried.
I was a little interested to see at the beginning if once Den saw Gunner and Core together, if there'd be some sort of storyline
No
beef there.
animosity there. There was no love there.
No love lot, no love there, and no quarrel. So seemed
Which
okay.
makes sense. There was no passion in that sex scene at all. It was
No,
purely
not from her,
physical act.
anyways. Not from her. But
Versus the Gunner and her sequence is a bit more passionate.
a little bit, a little bit. Yeah, I thought it was nice to give Den. That was a worthy death.
I think
He
for him that was great. Yeah.
For him, it was good, very good. So yeah, R.I.P. Den.
I guess you could say like the Devra Blood Axe could also be a pseudo MVP, bringing in the actual rebellion at that point and taking
Sure.
out some of those other ships. She's not the main cast, of course, so we're not really counting her as alluding to that
Right.
they had a big role in this. What do you think
You know,
about Gunnar really just being like, forget that, we're not trading lives here. Boom, we're we're starting this whole thing off. Like that's a pretty
I
brave
think
thing for him, going off of like literally like 2 days before he was almost killing all these people.
yeah, his character arc was a good one. I know I criticized him last time a little bit, but he made the right play for sure. I mean, there's no way they were just gonna be
Yeah,
merciful.
there's
So
no
it's just
talking to this team.
it was harder to believe Cora was willing to do that. Maybe she was just thrown off by him by Noble being there. She
Hmm.
thought maybe I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. She was being crazy. But
Yeah, she thought she killed
yeah,
him, and then like to see him in the flesh, it's like, oh, well, who
yeah.
knows?
So yeah, I Gunner, right move, good shot also to hit
Good
the
shot
bell
indeed.
far
Yeah,
away.
he also has that great moment where he like saves Cora on the King's Gates too. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, she's not able to defeat Noble if it's not for him giving that little extra oomph of a shot in the back to Noble that distracts him a
did
little
he
bit.
shoot Noble? I thought he shot his bodyguard.
Either way, he
Okay,
provided enough of a distraction that allowed Cora to do what she needs to do.
he very much helped. Yeah, he helped a lot. Pretty epic scene though. You always love a good fight scene where gravity just goes.
I know, especially when they got those molten swords going too,
Yeah,
and like
that was
just
pretty
cutting
epic.
through the ship. Like, man, how they executed that is really well done.
I agree.
And yeah, it led to unfortunately a lot of death in this movie. Not a lot of people survive in this poor town, and definitely the Motherworld people are not alive. There's a lot of death there. As Belisarius has no survivors. She will have seen to it.
Yeah. But hey,
um,
Hagen survived.
Hagen survived. Yep,
We love
yep.
Hagen.
He's awesome. Hagen's great. Um,
Who's your MVP?
my MVP, Jimmy. Oh yeah, Jimmy coming down this robot that's like this guardian angel when we need him most. He's a
Fair.
religious figure in some ways. He's a saint. He's a martyr. He's everything he needs to be. He's Jimmy.
Can't
Yeah.
can't disagree. Some of his dialogue still throws me off, like when he said, "Being called James makes me feel alive again."
Oh no, that was so good. That was so good. Because it means
But I
there's respect there. That's a growth for Cora, that she's no longer this killer of the mother world. Like at some point, she probably was calling them Jimmys, and the fact that he's like, "Hi, James," like the respect name,
fair, yeah, equals.
and then he's like, "Hey, this is great. I feel warm, fuzzy feelings in my heart. I will definitely support this team in their endeavors." Because he's like a Ronin out there. He's like this lone samurai that's just Ronin walking out there, and he's like, he doesn't have
Yeah,
to engage or he doesn't have to participate, but he's like, I'm going to help them out. And then he does.
yeah,
And then that's how they win the day. And then because of this reveal at the end, the big reveal, somehow Titus knows that the Princess Issa lives. Um, he's like, I'm bound by my oath to help you guys in this quest here. So he's going wherever they go next. But
yeah.
that's a big thing that the princess is still alive somehow. How do you think that she survived? Where do you think she is currently?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that she's obviously some sort of powerful being, and her healing powers saved her.
I
we
gotta
don't
think
ever
so.
get so much insight as to what she's capable of. Um, if she was already going to be made queen, that was pretty speaks a lot to what she's
Mm-hmm.
capable of. But at the same time, like Cora escapes, and then she's surrounded by Belisarius and the senators that just killed her parents. So you would think you have to imagine she was presumed dead
Mm-hmm.
and rises 3 days later. No, um,
She descended into hell, and then now is seated at the right hand.
yeah. So some sympathizer saves her. I think maybe she's taken to a morgue. Sympathizer, she comes alive somehow, gets taken,
Mm-hmm.
and now she's hiding like a nobody on a random planet. That's my best guess.
I mean, I'm surprised you're not thinking like Belisarius isn't keeping her in like some jail cell 50 feet under maximum security. It's like no one is finding out what the real truth here is. Arthelaus is the one that did it.
I
If
guess
she escapes, it's over. There'll be rebellion
that's
across the land.
it's very plausible. I just don't know why he'd leave her alive unless he learns that she can't be killed.
Yeah, maybe she
But
can't die. Ooh, that's a good point.
it's the only way I would see. He just seems like he would just tie up all loose ends. So
She's such a healer that she literally herself cannot die.
I guess, but if you just I don't know decapitate, you got to
I mean,
think.
it's like Kimiko in the boys, right? She can't die. She just regrows a leg here and there. If you could chop her head off, she'll just regrow it back.
Good connection. Good. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see. I'd love to find out.
She's just Wolverine, right? She just also will regenerate.
She's all powerful. All powerful.
She can provide forgiveness and she can heal herself. She's healing everybody. And that's
She's
why she's like hidden in a dungeon in the middle of the planet, because she doesn't Belisarius doesn't want any of that influence on him.
could
He's
be.
like,
Yeah.
keep that as far
Sure.
away from me as possible.
She's the definition of self-sufficient.
Literally, yeah, yeah. No, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, and like the question is like, how does Titus know about this? Like, that's where
Yeah.
I'm like, where, and he just doesn't offer to bring this up at all any point during the time. Like, he could have said it
Yeah.
while being a gladiator, but maybe people weren't going to trust him. I guess that's the thing. It's like, why would they trust this drunk gladiator who's just rambling? That's a disgraced
Exactly.
member of the Imperium, and now he has like, okay, people will trust me. They know I'm sober. I'm not just spitting out unk facts here, and they're just gonna not trust me here, and all of this. And yeah,
It could
yeah, that,
be,
that makes sense
but
now that I talk about it out loud.
it also could just be that he knew. We can talk about how he would know, but the fact that he knew. But it wouldn't be so relevant for anyone else in that group except
Yeah,
Cora.
that's true. That's true.
And
It means
you could say
nothing.
Jimmy, but Jimmy was not there most of the time. Um, Actually, I don't know if he'd ever even met Jimmy Titus, but
Yeah, they
before
didn't say a
the
word to each other before then.
yeah, I don't, so maybe like if Cora wasn't ready to talk about it, then he wasn't gonna bring it up. So I think
Mm,
maybe he was waiting for Cora to come around and then into that information. Um,
true.
as to how Titus could know, I mean, if we just play with our two hypotheses. I mean, if it's yours where she's locked away, I'm sure he's got some connections
He might have been
in
in
the
charge of
world.
guarding her at some point.
Could be. Sounds like a stretch, but he might know people that would know. I'm sure he's
Yeah,
got connects in the mother world, or if
true.
she is off planet, um, somewhere else through his time as a gladiator, maybe he picked up a rumor or two or learned
Came
a thing
across.
from each other. Yeah, so you
And
never
then he
know.
pointed and he was like, "It's actually Sam." Sam is the main fan theory of
Yeah,
the first episode was
no,
that, and then I guess not.
they did have that other new blonde girl sing at the very end of the director's cut. That's not in the
True,
PG-13
true.
one,
Yeah.
which was nice. It was a nice moment. I thought
What'd you
the
think of that
music
song? I like that song a lot.
it was nice. I think the score in general of the film was very good,
Yeah,
especially
Junkie
during
XL
some
did
of
a
like the slow mo on the fights on the battle on the
yeah,
bridge. I remember it being very nice.
that was really good. Yeah, Junkie XL did great with this one. So the film ends with that cliffhanger, and then also the other kind of one that's not in the PG-13 version at all, which is the Belisarius being like, "Oh, she lived. All right, interesting. Now I'm gonna go be a dictator to the legions here." Um, do you think that we will see more Rebel Moon stories, and how do you think the saga, if it does progresses from here?
So I admit I'm thinking we won't, just based on the fact that I mean we're doing this podcast in March 2025. The first one came out. What did we say? 2023 Christmas.
Christmas 23, and then April 24 was when Part 2 PG-13 came out, and then August 24 was both director's cuts.
Okay, thank you. So I would expect that we already would have heard about a third one if there was going to be one. Like I could always be wrong, but just based on timelines and how fast they moved for the first two, I would think that they would have already announced. So I'm afraid that the answer is no, that we're not going to get a third one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think they set it up very well for a third one. I think
Yeah,
bringing in the rebellion at the end, talking about Issa being alive, everyone's amped to fight. So I think it could be an epic storm the castle, movie. But I'm afraid we don't get it.
I'm afraid too that there's a chance we won't. Now, Zach has said they're currently writing it now,
Oh,
so maybe that like they just need to produce a script, and then Netflix is like, "Go ahead, watch, make it happen. You made us 4 movies for 150 million, and people watched it. If they don't like it, we don't care." That's kind of been Netflix's mo for a while now. Go check out the recent film that came out yesterday with the Electric Slate that was like 350 million that like people are not liking at all.
oh,
It's like the
really?
one of the most expensive films in the history of all time, and it's like got a 10%. No, I don't care about Rotten Tomatoes scores, but it has like a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that
Wow.
doesn't generally lead to people watching it, but it's Netflix, so people will inevitably just throw stuff on when they're
Yeah.
any weekend or during the week. They'll just throw stuff on there because it's Netflix, and that's kind of just like the cultural thing. You just go to Netflix and find something to watch and put it on.
Yeah.
Um, so
Could
there's a
he
chance.
could he make the third one with a different studio? I don't know if Netflix has the rights to Rebel Moon.
So I think they do, and they also have what's called a first look. So anything new that Snyder produces for his production company, Stone Quarry, has to be given for Netflix to say yes or no first. Um,
What?
Oh, a lot of studios have this. They'll just like pick talent that they like and then have this first look thing. So if they create something new, then they get the first right of saying yes, we want to make it or not. And then if they say no, then they get the chance to shop it to other places.
So
Um,
Zack Snyder more or less signed his life of his production company over to Netflix.
yeah, I mean it's a good thing. Um,
I
it
guess
creates a
so.
relationship between the studio and producer and all that. So it creates a great working relationship. And if they like each other, then they keep re-upping it. They have it for like the next 3 years, I think. I may be wrong on
Ah,
that, but they
okay.
have like it's like a quick like couple of year thing, and then they move on to something else if they don't like the relationship, and if they like it, then they keep
Ah,
going ahead. Zach
that's
is working on his next movie for Netflix, which is about a Los Angeles police department kind of more grounded story. for this. He's also working on a 300 prequel for Warner
Hmm.
Brothers, so that's kind of in the works as well. Um, so he's kind of got his hands in a bunch of different things, and accordingly, the last like update that we got a couple weeks ago was that they're writing parts 3 and 4 at the same time. So the intent is to have this be like a 6 part saga across from part 1 to the end, and they're gonna do,
Oh,
if all goes according to plan, they'll do 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, and then that's your beginning, middle, and end.
okay. And they'll be doing two versions of each?
Now that's the question: is we don't know yet. I think
Okay.
if they take the lessons from this one, maybe they don't do that. But if they want to
Mm,
keep that same thing going, I hope they do the same thing that we talked about, which is release them all at the same time.
at the same time, yeah. Yeah, 100% agree.
Now, the other
Okay,
thing that
well,
I
that
will
gives me
say
hope.
about the future of the story of Rebel Moon itself is that there's currently a, so while the PG-13 versions were coming out, there was a comic about the backstory of the Blood Axes that came out, so that's now available. There's
Nice.
currently a comic being written about the backstory more for Nemesis, so that's coming out in the near future.
Okay.
And for podcast listeners, there is a narrative podcast. What are they, like an audio drama kind of thing? A 6 part uh, series about the first Jimmy is out now, called the Seneschal. It takes place
Okay.
roughly 500 years before the events of part 1, or the birth of Princess Issa, it says. So, if she's roughly 13, let's say, roughly 500 years before that is when this story takes place. And it's really well done. 6 part,
Cool.
like half-hour episode each for that. Jason Isaacs is in it. A lot of interesting other people. If you watched, maybe you watched Fallout, or did you
Yeah.
check Rebel Moon out? Ella Purnell, the main character, the lady in Fallout, is one of the voices in it too, and she's one of the main characters in
Oh,
the audio
nice.
drama. So it's really well done. I actually think it might be the best Rebel Moon thing out there, but that's a conversation for a different day. Um,
Okay. Well, the
it's
spin-off
definitely,
opportunities are limitless when you
it's
with
true.
all the
Yeah,
characters. I
it's
I liked
def.
I liked Tarek's universe when they showed it being attacked by the Imperium. They're
Mhm.
giant hippogriff creatures. I forget
The
the name.
Bennu.
The Bennu
Yeah,
attacking the ships. That was pretty cool. I want more. I want more Bennu
it makes sense. Like that's why he's able to like connect with
to
it
tame.
in that
Yeah.
first one. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
shame that like a Bennu didn't just like float down in the battle and he was able to like use it during the sequence. But maybe that's the thing to look forward to in future installments of this, if and
Could
when that
be.
does happen.
Well, it's
Um,
encouraging to know they're doing a whole making a universe out of it.
they're definitely
Uh,
doing everything they can. They're trying to merchandise as much as they can. There's also a like, Netflix has wildly done this like video game VR experience that like travels from city to city, and they have like 2 versions of it right now. Like if you go, it was in Tampa a couple weeks ago, um, and it's like you put on this VR headset, and there's 2 versions. Like one is Squid Game VR, which I'm like, I don't, who would want to be in Squid Game, um, and then the other is like you get to be a one of the people in the battle at in part 2 here. So you get like
oh,
a gun too, and they put on the headset, and you actually get to pretend like you're taking
that's
out
cool.
the mother world soldiers while you're defending Velt. So that would be a really cool experience too. So they're definitely trying to make this happen now. Zach's doing this like grounded film. I think that's smart for him and good for him to do something different than just like being at a green screen all day.
Yeah.
Um, he also has like a Planet of the Dead film in the works, which is the sequel to Army of the Dead. So that might be a thing, and who knows where else it goes from here. But I'm hoping that it does, because it definitely ends on an awesome cliffhanger, and there's a lot of fruitful things to this world that I want to see where it possibly could go.
Yes, I hope so as well. To hear that there's potentially 6 movies total in the works. I had in mind trilogy, so like final boss movie, and but
Yeah.
sounds like that wouldn't be the case at all. But but you never know. Either way, I'm very intrigued.
Let's just say, like, based off of how they built up this world so far, right? It would be a jarring experience for in the third version to then take out Belisarius and like how big the mother world is, right? And like the fact that they have this literally a very small rebellion right now of like a
Yeah.
handful of people. They need to show some steps to grow it and grow it and grow it and grow it to then be able to take on the big Senate and all that.
That's a very fair point. It would be a lot would need to happen to in one final movie to make it feel satisfying. I think
Yeah,
and even believable. So I think
it's
you're
like
right.
the
They need
leap,
more.
but it's like the leap between the end of Dune and the start of Dune Messiah. You miss out on the war. Start at the end. It's at the end of Paul's life.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started.
You're missing the best parts. Come on, Villeneuve, figure it out. Show us the war. Then you can part
Uh,
four can be Messiah. Create a
no,
whole new thing.
it wasn't. None of it was a war. It was just slaughter.
I want to see it. I want to see Paul take over the known universe. Come on,
To be fair, he's following the books.
too
Even
well. Well, not
too
well. The
well.
Channy
No.
thing.
The what thing?
The Chani.
Oh yeah, there are quite a yeah. Obviously, there's some deviations that will happen from a book to movie adaptation, but for the war, like yeah, even from book 1 to 2, they never talk about the crusade. It's just it happened 30 years later. Everyone's under the rule of Paul. So,
Just happens, and then it's over.
but it's kind of like the we're off topic now. Like even the wars in the movies, like they're epic, but they're swift because that's what Frank Herbert wanted to show. Like Paul just wrecking anybody in his path because he was that powerful. Uh,
Well, no. You never know. He might show some stuff, and it may not be a full direct adaptation of Dune Messiah, which I think will be an odd one. If people, I think
yeah.
people that like parts 1 and 2 will certainly be if it's a full direct adaptation based off of what I know, and I know what happens in Dune Messiah, that there will be some eyes raised at at what they see on screen.
Yeah, let's each book just gets more and more sci-fi.
Until it's
So
so meta.
until yeah, so it's it'll be interesting to see how he does choose to interpret certain things, certain characters. Like there's a character that's just supposed to float in a jar in a cage of spice because like no muscles, so it just looks weird. So
Well, and when they
tricky task.
literally become worms, when people become worms, they've merged with worms. We're really gonna see something as a society.
Exactly, but hey, besides all that, I love the battle scene in the second movie. That was epic. But
But they've already done. Prophecy is not in the canon, so that's taking things outside of the bounds of what the Herbert wrote.
in what way?
I mean, you tell me, but like it's not. It's.
Oh,
I would think it's 10,000. It's 10,000 years before the events of
oh,
Dune
the
Part
show. I'm
One.
sorry.
So yeah, the show. Yeah, come
I thought
on,
you
we're on
meant.
Dune
I
talk
thought
here.
you meant. I thought you meant prophecy and like Paul prophesizing.
Oh no,
And
not
I
Paul
was like,
prophesizing and parading
no.
around as Lisan Al Gaib.
Well, I mean, there. It's hard to know about with the show. I mean, we've talked about it, but the Frank Herbert, yeah, only wrote 6 books, and then when he passed,
Yeah,
his
Brian's been
son,
writing up.
yeah, his son found in their attic like 30 boxes of all this material Frank had done for a whole universe, the whole universe. So there's unlimited spin-off potential there, and I chose not to dive into all these because then yeah, his son partnered up with a real writer to write 20 more books afterwards. Um, so
Yeah, a new
it
one
could
just came out a few weeks ago. I saw.
did it? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even following at this point. I just wanted to stick to the true core, especially because I specifically love how Frank Herbert writes. Um, but yeah, so Frank Dune Prophecy could very well originate from those notes of Frank. So while yeah,
True.
there's no book on it by him. That book could be in one of the other ones. So
No,
I
well,
don't
who
know.
knows? And you also got to watch the '84 Dune version too. That's kind of sitting out there for you.
I know we've talked about it. I've seen clips. It looks nearly unwatchable.
It's not unwatchable. It's from the '80s. That's the only downside to it. Is like we're blessed with modern technology.
No, I can get over that, but just the dialogue. I don't know. Just how I've seen it carried out. It's not enjoyable. But
It's
maybe if
more
I'm
it's more faithful to the books, arguably.
All right. Well, maybe
or book, I should say, book.
I'll have to suit up and give it a shot if I'm calling myself a real fan.
Apparently,
But
there's like a 4-hour version of it too that's out there because like they used to do when people used to watch things on TV, right? They used to
mhm.
like they show Braveheart on TNT on a Saturday afternoon, right? They would have to like take some of the deleted scenes that they didn't use and then put it back into the movie or refilm some scenes to like fill up a long time. So like in the 80s and 70s when things premiered on TV, they used to have like longer run times. And
Okay.
apparently there's like a quote unquote non-director's cut of the 84 Dune film that's out there. It's like 4 hours long. That it's kind of wild. It's kind of like a mythical thing out there. So maybe we'll track it down one day and get you to watch it.
The white whale.
The Holy Grail, indeed.
The Holy
Well,
Grail.
Peyton, this has been an excellent divergent into Dune talk here, but we were here to really chat and celebrate the things that were in Rebel Moon Chapter 2, Curse of Forgiveness. Do you have anything else about Rebel Moon before we close out here?
I think I've said my piece. I think as a macro, wrap up, really enjoyed part two. I thought it answered a lot of the questions from part one that I had. Um, Left it open to more, and I had no idea going into the second one that was even going to be an option. So I'm excited to see what this whole world could potentially turn into.
Yeah,
Really fun. It's the director's cuts allow you to connect with the characters and it was pretty gnarly. It's a lot of death, but it's fun. So hopefully, hope for more. Cross all the fingers. Knock on wood.
that's a good tagline. It's pretty gnarly, a lot of death, but it's fun. That's how if any movie's advertised that way, you'll have a great time, and I think you will have a great time, listeners, if you go check this film out, which I hope you have done already, and if not, go check it out as a result of listening to this, because we definitely spoiled you on everything that happens in this movie. So go check it out for yourself now. And for the folks listening, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode and something in the Star Wars, Lucasfilm Adjacent Galaxy here. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, we're available, of course, on X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and I think that's all of it there. Just search Force Ghost Conversations and we'll be there in some capacity. And until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.